أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وأعز المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المنتجبين واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين آمين رب العالمين. My dear brothers and sisters, we begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. All praises be to Him, everlasting and omniscient He is. We begin in His glorious and sacred name, and we send our peace and blessings upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, and our everlasting damnation and curses upon the enemies of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. I begin with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon you wherever you may be tuning in. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fast, accept your prayers, and accept your supplications, insha'Allah. And I thank you once more for joining us on our 5th episode as we delve deeper into the prophetic sermon that was delivered at the end of Ramadan, of the month of Sha'ban, or as some traditions say, it was delivered in the last 3 days of Sha'ban or the last Friday of the month of Sha'ban. We concluded our last episode, episode 4, and we concluded it with the 2 lessons that we extracted before we even began the khutbah. It was take the first 4 episodes as an introductory, and of course the last 3 being a very important introduction. And the first of the lessons that we emphasized upon, and we said that when it comes to the traditions of Al-Muhammad, the hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, the hadith of the Ahl al-Bayt, can consider it and understand that these narrations were not given to us on a silver platter. These narrations were given to us by blood. And remember, our first title was, when we talked about the first lesson, is the immortal words of the Prophet and his household. Understand that. And secondly, we mentioned that the importance of time, how sacred time is, and the importance of choosing the appropriate time and or time slot when it comes to various things, whether it comes to personal matters, matters of faith. 2 important things, 2 important lessons that I wish for everybody to take during this journey is to respect and understand the sacredness of time, and to understand the weight of the traditions, and that these traditions were not given to us as, like we say in the example, not given to us, maybe it's not a perfect example, but not given to us with a bouquet of flowers and wrapped in a little perfect gift box. No, through blood it was transferred to us. Through blood we inherited the Majami' al-Hadithiyya, the heritage of Al-Muhammad. If there's 2 things that we wish to take from the month of Ramadan, is understanding the weight of the Quran and the Ahl al-Bayt's traditions, meaning the Quran and the traditions of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, and understanding the weight of time and how important time plays a role in our everyday lives. Because especially Shahr-Ramadan, where we will see how its hours are sacred, its seconds are sacred, its days are sacred, its nights are sacred. Some nights are greater than others, as we see Khayrun min alfi shahr, greater than 1,000 months, Laylat al-Qadr. So that's why it's very important, my dear brothers and sisters. And of course, we're not going to go into detail. Now, 4 minutes have already elapsed of us giving a little background of what happened. But inshallah, if you're just tuning in right now, I suggest you go back inshallah and revisit the first 4 episodes, so you'll have insight as to what we discussed inshallah. And today, of course, we are beginning with the first line of the khutbah. Now, the first line of the khutbah is somewhat eloquent and there's a lot of lessons as well, and there's a lot of commentary for us, and we're going to be taking a lot of stops just in the first sentence of the khutbah. Now today, inshallah, we are going back now and starting the first line of the khutbah. We'll be touching upon the first line of the khutbah, and from the first line of the khutbah, you will see how many stops we will take. And this goes back to the tafakkur and the tadabbur when it comes to the hadith, to thinking and pondering and contemplating over the hadith, and not just reading it superficially as you read any article, any book, any sentence, or any phrase. The Prophet ﷺ said, أيها الناس إنه قد أقبل إليكم شهر الله بالرحمة والمغفرة والبركة, or البركة والمغفرة والرحمة, or sorry, أقبل إليكم شهر الله بالبركة والرحمة والمغفرة. I did a whole 180 there. The Prophet ﷺ says, and the month of Allah, he says, O people, first thing he says, O people, the month of Allah has approached, has neared, and with it comes blessings, mercy, and forgiveness. Now, if you are writing this down, of course, you can write that as your title. The first line of the khutbah, write that as your title. O people, the month of Allah has approached, and with it, it has brought, again we said, barakah, blessings, rahmah, mercy, and maghfirah, forgiveness. Now we're going to divide this into 4 subcategories under this main title. The first that we will discuss is ayyuhan nas, O people. The second category we will discuss is qad aqbal, and it has approached and has neared. The third category we will discuss is shahrullah, and the fourth category we will discuss is the 3 attributes, or the 3 divine blessings, or the divine unseen events that will be occurring in Shahr-Ramadan, however you may call them, which is these 3 divine attributes, which is the rahmah, barakah, and maghfirah, all stems from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is where mercy and forgiveness and blessings come from. So think of it as the month of divine affluence, the month in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's all these sacred traits, these sacred characteristics, these khisal, are basically showering upon us in this month. So these are the 4 attributes, inshallah, that we will discuss, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. First of them, we will stop ayyuhan nas. Now you ask yourself this. When I read the Prophet ﷺ here saying ayyuhan nas, now what can we say about ayyuhan nas? First things first, we're not exactly sure where this khutbah itself took place. But the high possibility is that it was delivered in Medina. Now, as you know, in Medina, it wasn't only the Muslims that were in Medina. In Medina was also those of Ahl al-Dhimma. Those Ahl al-Dhimma who are those who were in the protection of the Islamic government, the Islamic empire of Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him. So, first things first here, this is just a side note, that there's a possibility, of course, that the khutbah was not just, it was not just the Muslims that heard the khutbah. Because we will see now in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the same language in speaking to all of humanity, to all of mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many instances in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nas, Ya ayyuhan nas inna خلقناكم, or Ya ayyuhan nas ittaqu rabbakum, or Ya ayyuhan nas, and so on and so forth. From this, inshallah, and then after, first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to give some verses and ayat from the Holy Quran that do contain this language. We will comment on them briefly, and at the end, inshallah, we will conclude. What does this mean? that what is the possibility that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, used this sort of language? Because the Prophet لا ينطق عن الهوى, he does not speak out of his own inclination, as we said, right, in the introduction of our series. It's not out of his own hawa that the Prophet speaks. The Prophet, his words is mutabiq lil Quran. It's parallel to the words of the Quran, to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why it's very, very important that when you look at the words of the Prophet, you refer back to the Quran. If you refer back to the Quran, the first example that I have, when it's very, very beautiful, one of the many beautiful, all the verses of the Quran are beautiful, but this one as well has a lot of weight to it. Why? In Surah An-Nisa, the first verse of Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for example, He says, and by the way, you can call this as well, if you're wishing to also divide this section of O people, أيها الناس, I have it in my notes, in my research, I have it divided in also two other subcategories, because I will extract two lessons, right? Because what we're doing is we're going to be dissecting the sermon, correct? Dissecting O people. O people itself, I have extracted two main lessons. The first lesson, of course, is, as I have here in my notes, is that it's a general address. And we'll see. Let's read the ayah in the Quran first, and then I'll explain what I mean by general address. In the Quran, Allah in the Quran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها إلى آخر الآية. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O people, have taqwa. Have taqwa. And this taqwa doesn't entirely mean fear. That your Lord created you. خلقكم من نفس, from one nafs. And وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا. And then from that one nafs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the khalq, and so on and so on. Refers back to the creation of Adam alayhi salam and Eve. But our concern is not exactly to go too deeply into the ayah. We want to focus on the language of the Quran here. If you go refer back to the Mufassirin, the Quranic scholars of Quran who have comment on this verse or on the Quran, etc. Go back to the exegesis of the Holy Quran. You will see that they say that concerning the khitab, the address or the verbal disquisition of people, that this is usually referring to ammatun nas, ammatul bashar. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this language in the Quran, it's a reference to the people, meaning not just to the Muslims. Now, when we look at this ayah specifically, and many ayat like this, by the way, which are some of my favorite verses in the Quran, the verses of the Quran which teach us to search, to ponder upon the creation, to look at the signs, and we will look at some of these verses, for example, the ones in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and do they not look at the way that the heavens have been lifted, or the way the heavens are currently in motion? Do they not look at the way that the she-camel gives birth to her offspring? They do not look at the mountains and how they were raised. All of these verses in the Quran, they are not specific to the Muslim, right? These verses in the Quran are specific to mankind and to humanity. These Quranic verses, like in this case, for example, these Quranic verses, you can consider them as a wide broadcast, a sort of warning, a sort of reminder, right? The Quran is full of these sort of messages where the Quran speaks to mankind, reminding them. In this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to them, O people, ittaqullah, have taqwa in Allah. Meaning, not taqwa in the sense of fear Allah. Understand that there is a creator and understand his magnificence and that he bestowed upon you this sustenance and his mercy. And he brought you into this world and he created you from one nafs, from one soul. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Again, it does not involve neither a creed, neither a gender, neither an ethnicity. Especially when we look at the fact that this verse is the opening verse of Surah An-Nisa. And when we look at Surah An-Nisa, we see Surah An-Nisa encompasses so much laws. Of these laws are humanitarian principles that we ought to have. For example, I have here the chapter of Nisa addresses several matters such as familial rights, matrimonial rights, the rights of orphans, and several others. And basically what the Mufassirin are saying is that in order for you to attain and to have an understanding and to understand your obligations of these rights, you ought to then what? You ought to have taqwa in Allah. You ought to have that taqwa. Not just taqwa in the sense of fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You ought to have that devotion in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ali alayhi salam, what does he say? He does not worship Allah out of fear of hellfire, or out of envy, or out of wanting paradise. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam worships Allah because of his devotion and love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the stage that we wish to achieve. Now if you have that level of taqwa, when you come to the familial rights that you should have, rights of the children, and all the other verses in Surah An-Nisa, especially matrimonial, the interaction between husband and wife. When you have taqwa, you will truly understand your duty as a husband. And the sister will also understand her duty as a wife. And then you leave aside all the cultural practices and you focus on God's law. And only through taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, only through taqwa can all of this materialize. So I have written here, all of this can be fulfilled and manifested and materialized through taqwa, through piety and being God-wary and being God-conscious. And this insha here, this verbal disquisition, this khitab, this address by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to kafat an-nas. But O people, if you wish for all of your social and familial problems and your problems of society to be solved, be pious. This is a reminder. Be pious. And here I am reminding you where you come from. Have taqwa. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, let me remind you, have taqwa, first things first. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let me remind you, have taqwa, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you from one nafs, from Adam alayhi salam, our father. From that source, all of us come. And this also brings us to a very important part, very important message of this ayah. Again, it's an address to all of humanity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling all of humanity, Ya ibadallah, O creations of Allah, O slaves of Allah, wherever you may are, wherever you are from, wherever you are from, whatever your background is, whatever your ethnicity is, whatever your creed is, your color is, your asl is one. Your root is one. Meaning what? This means that all of these issues that we have in our communities, in the world at large, racism, right? That's one of the biggest issues that we are facing today. The fact that some parties think themselves superior to others because of their color. Some parties think themselves superior to others because of their creed, because we have that as well. Some parties think of themselves superior to others because of their social status, because of the money they make, because of their wealth, aristocracy and others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is reminding us all, informing us that يا عباد الله كلكم قد خلقتم من هذه النفس الواحدة. You were all created from one nafs. What does this mean? The Mufassirin say this addresses an important fundamental Islamic belief of al-wahdatul ijtima'iyyah, the unity of society, the unity of community. See how beautiful we were able to conclude this principle, this humanitarian principle? As we said, that Mufassirin, the scholars of Quran and the commentators, refer to it as al-wahda al-ijtima'iyyah, the unity of society, the unity of the community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing us, O ibadallah, why do you think of yourself high and mighty because of your color and social status? You're created from the same nafs, from the same soul, from the same, your origin, your root is the same. Either you think of that origin as being the clay of Adam or Adam himself. At the end of the day, we are all created from the same self, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why these verses of the Quran are some of my most favorite verses of the Holy Quran, because they give us a reminder. And the reminder, my dear brothers and sisters, is to all of humanity. In this ayah in the Quran, it is informing us about that hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he says man is either your brother in faith or equal in humanity. This ayah in the Quran, min nafsin wahida, supports that hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So you can see that Ali ibn Abi Talib does not stray from the Quran. He is with the Quran. What does that mean for us as we near the end of our discussion? Because it's important that we're discussing the language of the Prophet, Ya ayyuhan nas, right? But of course, we still have another second lesson that we want to discuss before we completely conclude what it means for the Prophet, for what it means with the words of the Prophet specifically. So we'll leave that for the next episode. But let's summarize, inshallah, what we discussed from this ayah in the Quran. So we said, going back, we said, first things first, that the khitab, the address of Ya ayyuhan nas, especially the ones in the Quran, as the Mufassirin have stated, that Ya ayyuhan nas is usually a khitab, an address to ammatun nas, all of the people, all of humanity, all of mankind. And then we said, of course, that especially since Surah An-Nisa is a chapter in the Holy Quran that speaks of several rights when it comes to familial rights, matrimonial rights, rights of the orphans, and other laws are all found in Surah An-Nisa. Surah An-Nisa encompasses so much of our laws. We said that in order for these laws to completely materialize, in order for you to completely understand the magnitude behind these laws, understand the weight of these laws, taqwa in the sense of not just fear of Allah, taqwa in the sense of devotion, sincerity and piety to your Lord, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala azza wa jal. And then we said, of course, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, in this specific verse of the Holy Quran, is providing a general reminder and address to all of mankind. And is telling us, O people, you were all created from one nafs. From one nafs you were created. So don't think of yourself as high and mighty. Don't think of yourself as superior to your brother in humanity. And we concluded as well that the ayah speaks about a wahda ijtima'iyyah, meaning what? Wahda ijtima'iyyah meaning a unity of society. And my dear brothers and sisters, this is, again, I say this again and again, This is why it is very important to take a moment, step back, and pay close attention to the words of the Quran. Please do not think of the Quran as a book that you just pick up and you begin to read. Do not think of the Quran as a fiction book or just a story, That's not how the Quran is to be treated. Remember how important it is to tafakkur and tadabbur, to ponder and contemplate upon the words of Allah. Look how you were able to extract the fundamental law of unity of society, that we were all created from one source, from the Quran. And the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is reminding all of us, just like you were created from one soul, know that there is a God. When you look outside and you see the mountains and the heavens and the creations, remind yourself that there is a creator. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here also is telling not just the Muslims, again, all of humanity, know and understand and comprehend this. It is up to you to go and find answers, my dear brothers and sisters. You see, we can continue to discuss this verse. This verse literally encompasses so many lessons, and we'll look at more verses just like this one, inshallah. But again, wahdatul ijtima', the unity of society. Taqwa is the miftah, the key towards several laws, and for somebody to be able to completely comprehend and fulfill these laws and not fall under the clutches of culture and society, to follow God's laws, he needs to have taqwa. And then at the end of this, we also learn that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us all, be humble. Be humble and know where you came from, and know where your end will be. And these verses like these in the Quran are many. Inshallah, we will discuss more in the next episode. And I ask that you forgive me. I haven't been feeling well, so I may have jumped left and right and may have repeated myself. But inshallah, the message is clear. And inshallah, I'll be praying for everybody, inshallah. And I pray that you pray for me, inshallah. And pray for the believers out there that need your dua every night, inshallah. Before you go to sleep, take a moment and say Ya Allah 10 times, every time you can, even after every prayer. Say Ya Allah 10 times, always. There's a dua that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam tells us that when you mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 10 times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say labbaik, especially during this month. And then take a moment to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and pray and beseech Allah through the Ahl al-Bayt alayhum salam, and ask inshallah that this tragedy and this trial and this affliction is lifted from us, inshallah. And inshallah we come out stronger than ever. Again, I ask for your forgiveness, and also I thank you, and inshallah we'll see you in the next episode. And in the next episode, inshallah, we will discuss the second lesson of this general address and look at more verses in the Holy Quran. And then inshallah we will conclude, and we won't be able to truly understand the meaning behind the Prophet's words when he was saying Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, but we can somehow conclude the general message, inshallah. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.